down. Point number 3 today is we who believe. In the book of Hebrews, the author goes into very, very detailed information about the work of Jesus Christ and the superiority of his covenant over the covenant of Moses. And then he goes and he quotes the 95th Psalm, which I read you earlier, to make a point about God's Sabbath rest. Now, this is going to get a little confusing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is where Hebrews is, and this is where King David is 700 years before, and this is where Joshua was 500 years before David. And then if I go like that, that means that's back at creation. Okay, so I want you to kind of get a picture of that right now. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works for 40 years. Therefore I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall never enter my rest. In what takes very, very considerate thought, the author of Hebrews quotes King David right here from hundreds of years before his time, and he says, today. And in most translations, you will see that today is capitalized because they want to stress the importance of what's being taught here. And then he spends all of the rest of chapter 3 explaining who the disobedient were back at the time of Joshua and in the wilderness wanderings, and how they failed to enter into God's rest. And then starting with chapter 4, he says this, therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed, the gospel was preached to us as well as to them, but the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith by those who heard it. If King David said today here, when he wrote the 95th Psalm, then he was speaking from his point onward, and he was saying that the word had to be mixed with faith. But Paul explains elsewhere that if those who are of the law, this period back here, if those who are of the law are heirs, then faith is made void and the promise is of no effect. In other words, it is faith which brings us into a right relationship with God, not with the law. In other words, it is faith, and it is faith alone in what God promises that brings his people into a state of rest, not the law.